Hello, everyone, and hello, Doug.
Nice to see you again, Chris, at our 11th podcast.
And I might add, this is our first podcast
Yep.
in 2026,
Yeah.
first podcast of the year.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're decanting, and we'll talk in a moment about our wine selection, which I might add, Doug and I went and picked up collectively at the local.
This is a
LCBO.
whole new way of doing things.
Yes.
We've been pushed into this new paradigm. It's a shift.
It's a shift.
Paradigm
But
shift.
for the folks that are watching and listening to this podcast, you'll see what wines we're featuring today. A sort of a high-end Chardonnay from the bench in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And
a very well-known producer in Mauritas.
Yes, and a Chablis, a Premier Cru.
A Premier Cru Chablis, 2022. This is 2023.
And our audience, unfortunately, can't experience what we just experienced, but we just poured these wines, and there happens to be a fan behind Doug, and
It blew the aromas onto you.
The aromas, the nose coming off those glasses.
Do you remember why we're doing this, right?
Why?
We were taking wines from essentially our own cellars.
Oh, yes.
And we were getting a little bit of pushback from our audience.
I think we explained that to the audience.
Well,
the
here
last
we
time.
are again, though.
But these are accessible
These are available.
and available. I meant accessible in terms of price point.
Okay, well, I think of accessibility in terms of drinking.
Okay.
So
That is the wine component. We're also going to discuss a few real estate component. We're going to decant some real estate. And I think we're going to try and confine ourselves to three subjects today. One brief discussion as to what happened in 2025, the Annus Horribilis.
okay, like a recap.
A very quick recap for the sake of time. And also it's now behind us, and I hope it stays behind us.
You and me both.
And secondly, a look at what's happening or what will happen in 2026. And then we'd like to talk about a very important case that was just recently determined. That I see it as more revolutionary than perhaps Doug does, and we can debate that. But I think
I think it's actually evolutionary.
Well, I see it as revolutionary.
Well, that's why you're going to probably regret having hired me after this podcast. This would be a good one. We have very differing views on this.
And lastly, and it is the other arm of the Greater Toronto real estate market, is the pre-con market, the pre-construction market. We're going to make a few comments because by the end of 2025, it has reached the lowest level of sales that we have seen literally since record keeping started in about 45 years ago. So we're going to talk about that. Should we?
Yeah, let's give this a whirl.
So
number one is the Niagara wine, the Niagara Chardonnay, in glass number one.
Okay.
And La Chablisien Premier Cru Chablis, glass number two. I'm not so sure this is a fair taste-off.
Well, it'll be interesting to see.
It will be interesting.
The nose off the Taz is amazing.
That's
absolutely amazing.
Well, okay. I actually like this off-the-shelf purchase.
I think the Taz nose is far superior to the Chablis.
I'm glad you feel that way. There's no doubt that Ontario is producing some great white wines.
That's incredible.
Are you on number two now?
No.
You are a big fan of Ontario white wines. But again, we're constrained here, I think, by the fact that most of the wines that you buy off the shelf, most high-quality wines need a little bit more time.
I would agree.
So, we might not be doing this enough justice because it's 2022 and it's a Premier Cru. It's built to have a little bottle age. Not a lot, but probably more than 3 years. It's a very rich wine.
Very rich, very rounded.
Yeah, that's a big wine. This is the biggest white we've had here, I think. Do you like it?
No.
Oh my God, this is the toughest audience in the world.
No,
Because you're now completely conditioned to Ontario Chardonnays, particularly from the county.
they're
more
cleaner, they're sharper, they're more like what a Chablis should be, in my opinion.
But it's not a Chablis.
But it's not.
It's very nice.
It is very nice.
The Taz is good. I won't deny that.
Very
At half
nice.
the price.
At half the price. Half the price.
Wow. Well, give this a little bit of time. Revisit it in 15 minutes after your review of the 2025
It's
year.
going to be very short. I called it a few moments ago the Annus Horribilis. There's no other way to describe it. We did a little over 62,000 sales. I can't remember the exact number.
62,433.
Nice. Very good, Doug.
And you predicted 62,500.
Don't hold that against
I'm
me.
going to.
We have to go back a long, long time in order to see a year in which,
1997?
into the 90s, to see a year
Crazy.
in which only
And we had half the population.
and half the population.
That is really an astonishing outcome.
Yeah. On a per capita basis, when you think of of that change, the 62,000 looks even worse than
Like
what
by-
we actually accomplished.
by half.
By half.
It is really terrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, explanation, I think, primarily is affordability and uncertainty.
Cost of living.
And unfortunately, in looking forward, both of those factors are going to come into play into 2026. Unlike other years, there is, I think, universality in terms of what people see for 2026. Almost all industry people, all the pundits, they're talking about and I'm talking strictly the GTA now. There's other parts of Canada where they're actually predicting very strong years. Quebec, some of the western provinces.
Couple eastern provinces.
Yeah, they're predicting strong.
Different market
2026.
dynamics and fundamentals than we have in Southern Ontario.
Average sale
particularly.
prices, affordability,
Yeah.
all those issues.
Supply.
But
Supply.
and supply. In the GTA's case, we're looking at a potentially, I'm hoping, and it's more like praying, that we're going to see close to 70,000 sales.
Yeah, you are praying.
But I probably am praying, because that would be almost a 12% increase.
And a return to 2024 numbers.
Yeah, still very low.
71,000 in
Yeah,
2025.
from a historic standpoint, but I'm hoping for that. Generally, the industry is predicting a 5 to maybe 8% increase in sales
And a decrease in prices.
and a decrease in prices. So the increase in sales will be at the expense of average sale prices. So if we come in with 67 to 68,000, that's probably
And a 4 to 6% reduction in
and a 4
overall
to
average
6%.
price.
So as we speak, the average sale price is around $1 million. If that comes to pass, by the end of the year, we'll probably be slightly under $1 million. All properties included. That is condominium apartments, townhouses, semi-detached, detached properties, all combined coming in at about a little under $1 million. Detached, semi-detached properties are going to be substantially higher than that.
Of course.
But that's generally where we're headed.
Tell our audience, in your estimation, what you recall and think and believe would be a really good marketplace where we have vigorous sales. How many units would that look like?
90,000.
90,000. 90,000.
And in fact, throughout the decade leading up to the pandemic, we were averaging about 90,000
Anybody,
year in and year out.
any analyst you've listened to, read, that is, when are they thinking those kind of, halcyon days will be back?
No one is even predicting that anymore, Doug. We're going effectively day by day, year by year.
But we really
Sadly.
we're looking for 85 to 95,000 units to come back to the glory days.
So we're hoping that during the course of these podcasts in 2026, that maybe we'll have some amazing
News.
news that the market may.
Well, maybe that's a theme we should be thinking about as part of our calendar of podcasts through this year. These kind of incremental updates.
100%. And they can be short. We can let people know,
Yeah.
but that's the forecast for 2026.
Yes. That's not really uplifting in any meaningful
It's not uplifting, but we have to be honest.
Yeah, we have to be
We have
realistic.
to be honest, be realistic.
Sure.
And I think it's helpful to buyers and sellers.
Although we were talking about the fact that maybe there'd be some impetus amongst buyers by virtue of the fact that the Bank of Canada has made it pretty clear, signaling there will be no further rate reductions through 2026, and maybe that spelled the bottom. And now we got to jump in. We were talking about that at a couple of our office meetings. Do you still take that position?
You have to remember that one of the reasons, and we talked about it a moment ago, that the market is not doing well is uncertainty. We live in very chaotic times where the world order has been turned on its head.
Everybody's talking about that.
And that creates uncertainty for buyers in particular, in my opinion, because the purchase of a home, regardless of whether it's a condo or whether it's a detached property, is probably the biggest investment that anyone is going to make.
Absolutely.
That being the case, if I'm going to make that investment, I'm going to make it when I'm certain about the future of that investment.
What about the certainty that does come from a stable interest rate environment?
I think it's overshadowed by the geopolitical uncertainty, Doug.
Although you can acknowledge that we've seen quite a perk up in activity in the last couple of days / week. Bidding wars all over the place.
Just like the swallows in Capistrano.
I'm more optimistic.
Just like
we were just talking about this as we came into the office. The activity level on our listings in the last 3 or 4 days has been wow, where did that come from?
I'm being conservative in my approach to this. Okay.
You used to be optimistic. Now you're being conservative.
I'm being conservative.
Have you been beaten down by the last 2 years?
Yes, I have been. Yes, I have.
That's it. I'm glad you acknowledge
Yes, I
that.
have.
That's a nice confession.
Yes, I have.
Good for you.
Caveat emptor.
Do you know what that means?
I do. Do you know?
I have a basic idea what that means.
A caveat emptor for the folks that are watching this podcast. Basically, in real estate terms, provided that if you're a buyer, caveat emptor meant that you should be aware of what you're buying.
Yeah.
And therefore do your own due diligence.
Because there'll be no recourse against
Because there's no recourse against the seller.
Buyer beware.
Yeah. Now, I might add that over the years, that has been eroded.
Oh, I'm glad you're acknowledging that. Because you're a diehard on this thing.
Reluctantly, I am, by the courts of equity, have been eroding the concept of cap.
And so have our governments.
Oh, yeah. Let's not get into that.
Yeah, we are totally getting into that.
I don't want to get into that right now. Okay?
Well, in a few minutes we are. Go ahead.
Let's just deal with this case. Okay?
That's what we're dealing with.
Right? Let's just deal with this case. So, buyer beware, caveat emptor. That's technically the principle that buyers and sellers should be operating with when they purchase properties. However, we get this case. I have it before me here. It involved. What you tell us what it involved, Doug?
It involved a seller in Hamilton, Ontario, who was in the business of buying, older homes, renovating them, and reselling them. Pretty typical, fast market thing. So he buys a wreck of a house with a view to rehabbing it entirely, essentially building a new house in the existing framework of an old house. But this was a little bit more complicated in that he had to raise this house. We're assuming that's because of the septic system.
Septic.
Yeah,
I assume. We don't know.
It's unusual to want to raise a house, but he did by 3 feet. So this is a massive renovation he undertook. And raised the house 3 feet and built a new septic system, which I'm assuming is a tank and a bed. He is going to market to sell it as a essentially a new home, and does sell it to somebody he knew, and you think that's a red herring, but someone who was also involved and hired as part of the contracting and work on the property.
Actually, I've thought about that a little bit more, and I don't think it's a red herring. In fact, I think it actually makes the case even worse than what it was, but keep going.
Well, but when I raised it last time at the office meeting, you were retorting.
I think of what you say, Doug, and I internalize it.
I'm touched by that.
Okay, continue.
So actually, the couple who bought the house actually put a mobile home on the property so that the husband could work on the house on behalf of the seller during the construction.
Fully aware of what was going on in terms of the renovation.
Talk about buyer beware.
Yeah.
He was there every single day.
Correct.
That's very interesting. Now I'm coming around to your side of this
See?
equation. Okay, so
Go
the
ahead.
more and more we talk about this case, the more interesting little nuances at law and in fact come out.
Correct.
So they closed the deal. Turns out that the seller, took a few permits out to reconstruct this house, but failed to get two meaningful permits,
Two crucial permits.
two big ones, raising the house by 3 feet and putting in a new septic system. And didn't get a permit for that either. Needless to say, this blew up, and
After
they moved in. They closed.
They moved in. They closed,
Yeah.
and then
We think the septic system contaminated the well,
correct.
but it wasn't clear in the summary of the case. But that must have been what happened. He built the septic system or bed too close to the well. That wouldn't have been permitted had he taken out a permit.
Correct.
There would have been drawings as to where you can put this.
Correct.
He sues, damages. Obviously, one of the big things that came up was a lack of permits.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really the crux of the case for you and I.
Correct.
So there were damages. The seller actually lost on the case on costs to replace and move the septic bed. No damages associated with having raised the house without a permit.
Yeah, because there was no proof that was done in a way that was inconsistent with what the code would have required.
Correct.
The house was still standing. There was no visible
Cracks,
evidence.
tilting, leaning, settlement.
But there was
nothing.
clearly a problem with the septic.
Right. But up comes the whole discussion about these permits,
Yeah.
which dominates a lot of discussion in our day-to-day lives as we're navigating the landscape of Toronto real estate with people who have taken out permits and failed to have them closed, people who failed to take out permits entirely. This is all part of the myriad of our day-to-day
Yeah,
lives.
and relates to this concept of caveat emptor.
Right.
The question was buyer beware. This buyer, if I were to apply the principle, should have been aware of what was going on. That
Because he was there, you mean?
He was there. He was living on the site, for
Right.
heaven's sakes.
That was my point.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, when he buys the property, and he knows, of course, everything that went on, he subsequently discovers that there weren't permits. The seller takes the position, hey, buyer beware. You should have known what I was doing. And even if you didn't, it was on you to do your due diligence.
And investigations.
Exactly. And if you didn't, too bad.
So the argument would be, on behalf of the defense, you could have looked to see if I had permits.
Correct.
You chose not to.
Correct.
We don't know why they chose not to. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. There could be all sorts of reasons that we've discussed. That's a sidebar. I don't think we should get into that right
No,
now.
we should get into where in my opinion, a revolutionary change takes place.
Okay, and that's on the implied terms.
Yeah, because the court says, what we have to do is we have to bring a third party to this.
What would that third party's name be, per se?
The officious bystander.
Bystander.
Bystander. The officious.
The person who's standing by.
So, yeah, he's this mythical person standing by, watching everything taking place, the renovations, the agreement of purchase and sale, the closing. And what does the court say? It said that officious bystander. Bystander. If he were there, he would have said, there's terms that are implied in the agreement. Buyer didn't put them in, but they're implied by the officious bystander.
Which we used to call the reasonable man.
That's what we used to call them.
Apparently, I'd never heard of the term before, neither had you.
Neither had I, but we have since discovered that it is a term that the courts are using. So this officious bystander, he would have said, you know what? There should have been terms in the agreement that required the seller to get permits for the septic and for the raising of the house.
No, they're going to assume those terms exist in a contract.
Correct.
That's an implied term.
Correct.
Whether you put your minds to it or not, it's kind of like a standard term.
So then the court ultimately says, since those terms are there on an implied basis, you breach them. Liability.
You don't like that.
No. Because where does it end? Either we have contract where people address their minds to the terms of the contract, and if they don't, that's their problem. We can't have the officious bystander constantly there, filling in the terms that the parties didn't put in.
And you know what? I'm coming around a little reluctantly to your position because I think that's true. On the implied term
Let me give you a simpler example. You know, and probably most of the people that are watching this podcast know that there's a standard term in most agreements of purchase and sale where the buyer requires the seller to warrant that everything is in good working order.
I'm very familiar with that.
Right? The fridges and stoves, the plumbing system, electrical, you name it.
Everything.
Let's just say that a buyer doesn't put that provision in the agreement.
Mm-hmm. Should it be an implied term?
Is that what the officious bystander is going to do? He's going to imply that it should have been in there, and therefore there's liability when the parties never address the matter between them?
Well, if you take the opposite of a good working order provision, that would be an as-is provision.
Correct.
Okay, so
put it in.
Well, hold on a second. I think the officious bystander, reasonable man, would argue that there are two possible positions here. So with no implied terms, if you didn't address either of them, you didn't put in a good working order provision, and you didn't put in an as-is provision, then there is no implied term because there is an either or, but not in the case of building permits.
Yeah.
But isn't it fact driven? Building permits and your obligation, you've got to take a deep breath on this one.
Okay, I'm going to actually take a taste of
the
Premier Crew.
What you are so excited and angry and aggravated by the officious bystander implying terms into an agreement that you and I didn't intend to have in that agreement because we didn't put our minds to it, which we could have. Either party could have put a term in.
Correct.
And then you could have said yes or no, or vice versa. So that's the part that's aggravating you. But to our colleague Anthony's point, every one of these circumstances that a judge is dealing with is mostly fact dependent, and turns on the facts. And the one piece here that's different than whether you put your mind to an as-is provision or a good working order provision, and whether the officious bystander should be putting his nose into that agreement. In this circumstance, we're dealing with legislation. Society, government, all of us have put together a building code and a law as to how you have to operate as a builder. For my own health and safety, we can't have you building a house without permits, without compliance with the building code, because I might inherit that and get hurt.
Okay. So you're saying that this is restricted to this particular fact situation?
I think it's restricted to those circumstances where government has intervened into the relationship between a buyer and a seller. And I think we can also clearly argue, thank you, probably somebody like Ralph Nader, who have been advocating.
Ralph Nader?
Yeah, Ralph Nader. Wasn't he?
People here probably haven't even heard of Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader,
ran for president of the United States.
I know. He didn't do very well.
No.
Yeah. Hell of a campaign, mind you.
Yeah.
He was a consumer advocate.
Correct.
For change in consumer protection legislation, like Ford and car companies and so on, having to give warranties and insure against cars that are blowing up when you back into them, like the Ford, was it the Pinto or something that was explosive in a very small interaction with another vehicle? He was a consumer protection advocate. So are so many Canadians. And the governments have listened over successive generations and implemented legislation geared at consumer protection. And you and I are in one of those every minute of the day because TRESA, the Trust in Real Estate Services Act, is nothing but consumer protection legislation.
Agreed.
So when the government is involved, I think it's a different situation than two parties contracting where legislation is not impacting upon their relationship and their respective obligations. And I think that's what distinguishes this case.
If that is the distinguishing factor, then I accept it.
Oh,
I accept
I
it.
never thought we'd get to this
No,
point.
I accept it. I accept
We are ad
it.
idem
If
on
it
that.
goes beyond that, then we're definitely not at
Well,
idem.
you're suggesting that I don't agree with your position if it goes beyond that, and I do agree with you.
Then we're totally at idem.
We are completely simpatico on this. It's just this
This
wrinkle.
is rare, Doug.
It'll never
This
happen
is
again.
rare. What
Don't
about?
get used to it.
Okay, we did that.
Okay.
What about the wines?
I'm not grooving on either of them.
Are you serious?
I am. I'm sorry. I don't know. They're flattening out for me now. I'll try. I'll give them another try. I'm a very open-minded or not person. No, that's not working for me anymore.
I agree. It's flattening out.
If flattening, there's a bitter background now.
Where's that coming from?
I don't know, but it's not enjoyable anymore. It's gotten that bitter aftertaste at the back of my throat. It was maybe as it's warming up, that's coming out. Would you agree with that, Christian? I think the temperature is having a tremendous impact on
I
that
agree.
wine. So you got to keep that really cold.
And you know the interesting
continuously
thing,
refresh
the
your glass.
Premier Cru's nose is becoming much fuller. Lots of different things going there. Like
And this is getting a little.
pineapple,
Well, there's that pineapple
banana,
thing. It's a little too now fruity for me. It's not clean enough. So maybe this needs another year or two in bottle, and this has to be colder. But there it is. I think white wines are all
Interesting.
wine is.
It's interesting. Well, that's the purpose of decanting.
Yeah.
Is discovering, as we're discovering with real estate. And I think our last topic that we should get to is the issue of the pre-construction.
Can you believe
market.
how we resolved the last one? I'm very happy with
It's
our
interesting
outcome.
because the folks that are watching this aren't aware of the fact that we've debated this subject leading up to
It
today.
almost ended in fisticuffs.
But see, more time, more thinking, and being the reasonable man.
I'm being the reasonable man.
I thought I was being.
Well, I'll say we're both, but I'm not an officious bystander. Let's be clear.
Never.
I'm not implying terms
Never.
into somebody else's agreement.
Never.
That's interference in my aspect.
I
That's a
agree.
yellow card.
Yeah. In fact, there's almost something.
Nefarious?
Yes. The pre-construction market. I think
We talked about this a lot, but
Yeah,
it's
I
on
think
our
we
minds
have
too.
to-
This is bugging
No,
us.
but I think we were talking about what happened in the resale market. We have to mention that the
Well, you did mention it a bit. That it's the
yeah,
lowest ever.
the pre-construction market hit absolutely
Yeah.
rock bottom
Yeah.
in 2025.
Almost the worst in a half a century.
And we talked about the resale market at least improving a little bit in 2026, but there doesn't seem to be any sign that it's going to improve in 2026, 2027, 2028,
Oh, stop it.
and potentially into 2030 and beyond. There are some pundits that are talking about a 7 to 10 year cycle before the pre-construction market improves. And why?
Three and a bit have already been eaten up
Correct.
of the 7-year cycle.
Correct.
So another 4 years.
It's another 4 years. And why? And
In
what-
pre-con, we're talking about
and
now.
what
Just
needs to change? What needs to change? And we itemized 4 or 5 factors that not only we believe in, but that the industry
widely held positions.
is concerned about.
Yep.
And why don't we raise them one at a time?
So how do we resurrect, reinvigorate, realign this pre-construction market, because we need it.
100%.
We need new construction.
We should mention to our listeners that with this crunch that's happening, if nobody's building, you can imagine where we're going to find ourselves in 2030.
No supply.
No supply.
A
So we're going to
housing,
go through the same
a housing
cycle,
shortage.
yeah, that we went through in the pandemic years.
Now, we're not just talking about condo towers. We're talking about bricks and mortar, townhomes, semis, detached home, and subdivisions all across
Ontario.
And for that matter, all across the country. But we're just focusing on our immediate world
Correct.
of southern Ontario for where the construction
But-
is densest.
But a lot of
Most dense.
these concerns that we're going to raise
Apply everywhere.
Apply everywhere.
Of course.
I mean, and the first one that you and I have talked about is the way new construction, particularly residential
High-rise.
condos, high rises, is financed. How's it financed?
So the developer has to pre-market this building that he's putting up, call it a 50, 60, 70-story condo, and let's call that 400 or 500 apartments. has to have 70% of those units sold before construction financing is advanced. That's a standard system in Ontario. Makes for a very, very difficult marketplace to sell all those units, particularly when you don't have any foreign buyers.
Correct.
Which have been
So here we have two things that we're talking about.
correct.
We
The
have a
first and
foreign
the
buyer's
last.
ban
Yeah.
or a tax, which almost amounts to the same thing, and we're building to sell to people.
Because that's what we've been doing since the 90s, right? We've been building these units to get to 70% financing. It's dependent enormously on foreign buyers purchasing these units, usually en masse and very, very quickly. And then it takes 5+ years for that to develop into a unit that you can sell.
Unfortunately, though, the foreign buyers and the investors weren't interested in end user units.
That is the most significant point of all of this. It all boils down to the units were not built to be lived in. They were built to be a commoditized financial vehicle.
Well said.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And
well
all
said.
the other things we're going to talk about are peripheral to that, incidental to that, but might not really be the fix, because that is the crux of the problem and the toughest thing to change
And
because of land costs now.
Well, yeah, I was going to say we'll get to that in a second, but there are some things that can happen that will improve the possibility of that coming to pass. The other area is development charges. I think
Insane here. Insane. Adding $150,000 to $200,000 per unit.
Yeah.
Who can
Government
afford
costs.
that? Who can
Government
afford
costs.
that? Taxes.
Yeah. And it doesn't end there. Land transfer taxes
Both provincially and municipally.
in Toronto.
Insane amount of money. Insane amount of money. Where do people
Hundreds of
just try to get
thousands of
together a
dollars.
down payment?
Yeah.
Forget about paying the land transfer tax. And then the maintenance fees on these condos.
Correct.
And interest rates currently. These all conspire to make
There
this
used
a
to be
mess.
also the HST
It's eliminated for first-time buyers.
for first-time buyers up to a
but
certain
that's a
level.
reasonably new incentive.
New. So we'll see how that plays out in
I think it's going to have
2026.
I think that's
It
going to have a
should.
meaningful
It
effect.
should. But we have to do something about the land transfer taxes as well, because in the city of Toronto, as you know, not only do we have excessively high land transfer taxes, we also have a foreign buyer's tax on top of that
In Toronto.
in Toronto. So if you're expecting a foreign buyer to buy condominium units, whether they're end user or not, they're not going to do it. It's just too expensive. So
Tell the audience what these taxes amount to. For on the provincial level, it's 25%.
yeah,
If a foreigner buys a property in a non-dense area, you
Correct.
can't buy in the city of Toronto.
No.
So there's no tax applicable. Like this Toronto, city of Toronto, 10% tax on top of the provincial 25% tax is ridiculous. It's because it's not possible that they're going to collect it because foreign buyers can't buy in a metropolitan consensus area.
correct.
But they can pay 25%.
So this is just political chirping. on
Well,
the
I
part-
think the 10% was with a view, they were looking to capitalize on the foreign buyer ban being removed. So foreigners were going to then come swarming back into
swarming back after paying a 25% tax
and they'll,
in
and-
Ontario.
No, actually 35. We'll catch a 10% just for the city.
Come on.
It's ridiculous.
It's political chirping.
Right. It all has to be
Political
eliminated. Let's
chirping.
face it.
Yes.
The foreign buyer ban is now 3 and a bit years mature. It was already extended once. It's coming to an end at the end of this year. I'm really hopeful that
I think we all are.
cooler heads prevail in government and they realize it's time to just put this to bed.
Yeah. And
And-
provincially, they either
Eliminate the tax.
eliminate or reduce it to some level that.
Why do we need it at all?
I agree.
We don't
I
need
agree.
it. We've
I
we've,
agree.
we've seen it already essentially crush the condo market.
Mhm.
And I'm a firm believer that this foreign buyer ban and the taxes, not so much the taxes, the ban has really, really had a terrible impact on condominium construction. That's the number one
100%.
piece. If that's what they wanted, it worked. If that's what the government agenda was, success.
But just to reiterate, so moving forward over whatever period of time, that cycle that we talked about, potentially 7 to 10 years, some of which
I hate hearing that.
well, but some of those years we've already dealt with, at least 3 of them.
Yeah.
We definitely need to do something about the foreign buyers ban /tax. We need to do something about land transfer taxes. We need to do something about development charges. And lastly, and I think this should be the last one,
Livability.
we need to do something about livability. And before we started chatting today, Doug and I were talking about some architects that were
Yeah, there was an
talking
article
about-
today, actually, for anybody who has the Star online can read. It was actually a very, very well-written article, mostly by architects, commenting on a developer who's looking to be more creative. And I think the architectural comments, mostly, I'll summarize, I won't read it, are about the fact that I think everybody's tired of the glass curtain wall buildings that are all exactly the same,
100%.
littering like a forest of glass monolithic towers. It's time for some architectural ingenuity and creativity to start making our built environment more friendly and more beautiful.
Beautifully said, Doug.
Yeah. So,
Nicely said.
thank you. That's one piece of it, though. But the bigger issue, and of course they are all commenting on hand, we also have to change our whole way of thinking. We used to build units for the investor market, for the financial commoditization of real estate market. And now we have to build it instead for the users, so families can come and move into the city of Toronto. And do you have any thoughts on that? Because I'm very negative. I'm very pessimistic that
Well,
this
the
could change.
reason we're both pessimistic about this is it's wonderful to state that,
It is.
but when we get to practicalities, particularly costs, the kind of unit that we're looking at that would be livable for a family, it's going to cost over $2 million.
Right. And that's arguably bare minimum standards of square footage in terms of livability for three or four people in a household. So who's buying that?
That's the problem.
Only the rich.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So are all these condo developers, because the land is so expensive, right? They're in a perfect world, they're building smaller, lower buildings, fewer floors, more kind of get your hands around feeling, not 80 stories, but let's say 15 to 25 stories, many fewer units in order
Kind of
to
a
recoup
European.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to have, and bigger units, they're going to be massively expensive. Who's going to be able to afford to live there? Only the very rich.
Yeah.
It's going to look like New York in that sense. So it's
So
very
even- so
difficult.
I think what we're concerned about is even if we improve the financing dilemma that we find ourselves with, even if we improve the development charges, even if we improve land transfer taxes, even if we get rid of the foreign buyer restrictions, affordability is still going to be an issue.
It might even be a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Because young families hoping to live in the city will be shut out of the marketplace, which
Well,
is kind of sad.
That's something that during our podcast we should also bring folks up to date on, see how the industry is adapting and the politicians are adapting, because we need almost a tripartite
At
approach
least
to resolving
everybody
this
has to this to this, to
Correct.
resurrect this system.
Correct.
That is broken.
Yeah. But on that note, and before we close, do you think these wines have resurrected themselves?
I think now we're down to the part where it's too warm. Because
They are?
Yeah,
So this is the last opportunity.
I think so. I was hoping to be a bit more impressed with these. But I do like our system. I do like the idea of going to this LCBO, buying wines and trying them. I think that's,
I can't even
yeah.
taste that. Thank you, Doug.
I enjoyed this.
I did as
Glad
well.
to be back
I
in
hope
2026.
the folks enjoyed it. We're happy to be in 2026.
And we'll see you again in very shortly.
Very short order. And we may have a surprise the next
We
podcast.
do, or the one after that. I'm not sure. It might be one in between, but we do have a surprise.
We do have a surprise.
So
So until then, please, everybody stay well.
stand by.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.